Good morning, everyone. Pastor John here with another Dive Deeper. I hope you had the chance to tune in and watch our service from yesterday where we kicked off our new series, But God. We're talking about the times in history where God intervened and he turned negative circumstances, burdensome situations, overwhelming conditions, and he pivoted them just on these two words, but God, and he changed those circumstances into situations of his blessing and his provision and direction and will. I hope that as we go through this series that God really speaks to you and that he spoke to you yesterday as well. I'll link to that service here in the comments so that if you didn't have a chance to watch it or if you'd like to watch it again, you can certainly access that. And I hope that God speaks to you. And I believe that he's going to speak to you in our Dive Deeper today. One of the reasons why I think that he's got a word for you is I was just kind of preparing last night for what I was going to share with you this morning. And, really was looking through some of the notes that I had done on some previous quiet times and felt like, okay, well, I knew what God wanted me to share. And then later on in the evening, as I was listening to some scripture in just another quiet time, God used one of those scriptures in that quiet time, just kind of confirming that what we're going to talk about today is something that I think many of us need to hear. The first passage we're going to read comes from 2 Samuel chapter 14. At the time when Absalom, David's son, had been banished for the kingdom. Now, the situation that led to his banishment is very serious indeed, and certainly you could read through the details, but David wanted his son back in his kingdom. And this woman comes to David and she shares with him these words. In 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 14, it says this: "We must all die. We are like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. But God will not take away life, and he devises means so that the banished one will not remain an outcast." When I look at this, to me, I love this verse. God will devise ways that the banished one will not remain an outcast. Now, this verse is certainly one that gives us hope. You see, our sin banished us from God's presence. Our sin caused us to be outcasts from heaven, caused us to be separate from the Lord. And we can celebrate and rejoice today because God, the way that he intervened, he devised a way that our banishment would not be eternal. Rather, he sent Jesus to this earth to take that punishment of separation for us. We see this in Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 10. And, you know how much I love Romans, and so we have to share something from Romans every once in a while. It says this: "For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare to even die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. For while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. Much more, now that we are reconciled, shall we be saved by his life." You see, God knew that Jesus would need to come in. And even before we were ever even thought of, before we were alive, it says, while we were still in sin, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and that we have been saved by his sacrifice, by the shedding of his blood, that we have hope because he has resurrected and he is now with God. We know that we can be there. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me is, this has while we were still sinners, but in Revelation 13, it says that Christ was slain from the foundation of the world. That means that when God said, "Let there be light," when Jesus executed that command, that this was done with the complete foreknowledge of our sin, with the complete awareness of our sin, and then the sacrifice that Jesus would need to make. You see, Jesus' death on the cross was set in stone, was established at the same time that God created the world. He was slain from the foundation of the world. You see, God always makes a way for those who are banished so that they are not going to remain an outcast. You see, he made sure that our punishment would not be eternal, that we would not be separate from him forever by sending his Son into the world. He always devises a way that those who are banished will not remain outcasts forever. So I have two challenges for you today. The first, I really want you to understand that God has made a way for your salvation. I want you to realize that there is something that God has done for you. That work is already complete. When Jesus said on the cross, he said, "It is finished." That means that there is nothing else for you to do. So please, if you have never received that gift of salvation, now is the time. Surrender to him. You can do that with just a simple prayer, acknowledging your belief in him and what he has done, and you confess that he is your Lord. You surrender your life to him. Second, I want to just challenge you and ask you, okay, maybe you have been an outcast in this world. Maybe at one time you were an outcast from God, but you have been saved and redeemed, and now you are his child. Well, as his child, you have to know that there is work that he has set out for you to do, that there is kingdom work that he is already doing, and he's waiting for you to join him in that work. Now that he has brought you into his family, now that you are no longer an outcast, ask God where he is doing kingdom work around you and where he wants you to plug in and join in that work in his kingdom now that you're a member of it. I just pray that God speaks to you and that he continues to reveal his plan, his love, and his will for you. God bless you as you dive deeper into his word every day.